I just got to a point where I was so cynical and frustrated that I just said, I'm not going to spend much more time on this faith stuff because it's just not too helpful. I walked away for a pretty long time.
Probably an unpopular question here, but what are the post-college struggles that would leave you wondering if your faith was worth continuing at all? For this week's guest, it was loneliness and lack of community. It was stress and exhaustion from being overworked. And it was that nagging feeling that when his extremely intelligent coworkers said that God was just an invention, a fabrication, that they were actually right. And that came as a huge shock because this week's guest, Rocco was highly involved in his InterVarsity chapter at Clarkson University. He had a life-changing experience at Urbana, and when he graduated, he was excited. He was passionate about his faith, he was looking forward to sharing it with people, and he felt prepared for the next step. But he wasn't prepared for the crisis of faith that was waiting for him in the next season of life. Thankfully, God showed up, and he did it using a really strange duo, unimaginable, Rocco's campus staff and his own grandma. You just can't make that stuff up. Side note, this is a re-edited version of an interview from a couple of years ago, and we started a few minutes into the conversation this time, so if it feels like you're jumping into the middle of something, it's because you are. This is also the first time that the conversation is available to watch, so tune in on YouTube and Spotify for that. You'll see that a couple of years ago we didn't have quite the same studio arrangement that we do now. You'll understand when you see it. Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele, and this one's for you, alumni. You're a part of this InterVarsity chapter that's on a campus that's out in the middle of nowhere. You have these amazing experiences with Friday Night Live, with going to Urbana, getting to experience the small taste of maybe what heaven is going to be like. And these kind of things, I'm assuming these kind of things just kind of continue throughout your college career, throughout your time with InterVarsity. And then inevitably, graduation comes along. And so just like kind of big picture, what were the expectations that you had for your life as you were on the brink of graduation? What did you think, like, this is what's going to happen next for me?
Yeah, I had a lot of plans.
Okay.
I think that was the story of my life in college is, always had every, a 3-year outlook basically fully planned out, I don't know how many other viewers or people, could relate to that, but everything was, pretty much planned out.
Yeah.
So for me, career wise, I knew where I was going. I knew that I didn't know much about what I'd be doing or if I'd like it. but I knew I was going to be going there and they would be paying my bills, which is a good thing.
Hey, nice.
Yeah. And a good side effect too was that actually my roommate from Clarkson for I think 2 years while I was there, he was going to be my roommate down there. We ended up linking up. Yeah, we ended up linking up, and he ended up being my roommate for another 8 years.
Oh, so that's awesome.
It was a very strong friendship that we have even to this day. I guess
so. That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, career wise, I knew I was going there. I didn't really know much about what I really wanted to do. Relationship wise, I was actually in this was with my previous relationship, and I had been with that person for about 2 to 3 years. So, my expectation was, okay, I'm graduating, she's probably gonna be graduating pretty soon too, likely a year or so, we might be tying the knot or, thinking about next steps. And then spiritually, I was like so on fire. I was, all the InterVarsity reaching out and, ministering to people and, and I was really, I don't know if you're a big fan of like apologetics, but I was huge into the apologetics scene and like reading all the different books and, so yes. I had this, huge passion for, okay, I'm going to read all this apologetic, combine into this giant, thing that's going to be super beneficial for multiple people.
Yeah.
Maybe even the workplace, so I had big expectations, going out, and I had a big plan.
Yeah.
Going out.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you had spent some time, you had put in the work, you were preparing. And and it seems to me that you were pretty hopeful that like, okay, there are good things on the horizon, for life after graduation. Well, so then the thing that's always interesting then to me is to say, then what actually happened. So when you step into life after graduation, what happens next for you?
Yeah. Boy. Yeah, quite a bit happened. I mean, it was definitely, good things. Like a lot of good things happened. But there were a lot of unexpected things. In my career, I felt like I was doing well. I worked like crazy. I think I worked, probably 12-hour days each day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, mostly because I didn't want to put anything down, and they had a lot to learn, and the company, had a very complex thing that we worked on. So there was no shortage of things to learn and things to do. So I took a lot of advantage of that. But had a hard time, and I'm not sure if others have had the same experience, finding a work-life balance. Just didn't come natural. In college, it was like, okay, you deliver this one thing, and you have a deadline when it's supposed to be done, and then that's it. You get a grade, and you move on.
Right.
With work, it was like, okay, you're done with that thing. Oh, well, here's the next thing. Or oh, you're done with that thing. Oh, well, actually, we tried it out, and it has these bugs. Could you fix this? And then that becomes like a 3-year
oh my gosh
commitment to fixing bugs or making incremental changes.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely, work-life balance was difficult. There were surprisingly a small amount of people who were really, believers of anything. Most folks were, they were either they just went to church on Christmas, or they, actively did not like the church.
Sure.
And it was kind of discouraging, because these were folks that were really intelligent and kind of folks that I looked up to, that were telling me things like, that this is crazy and it was invented. And so eventually, all this, uncertainty, lack of a supportive Christian community, in that, and just the doubt. I mean, because of what I just learned,
right?
I just became very cynical. Looking back on it, makes perfect sense that you become cynical, because you read one person gives an argument and you're like, yeah, and then another person gives an argument and you're like, yeah, and then right. they're complete stark opposites of each other. So yeah, it became very cynical, and I kind of ran my excitement for the faith into the ground by just sitting and reading intensely into all these books, and I had thick books that I'm reading through, and almost just like killed my faith with drowning it in the sort of I want to be rightness, and trying to figure out, okay, which one of these is right. And so it eventually I just kind of got to a point where I was so cynical and frustrated that I just said, I look at my career, and I have my career pays my bills. My career, I look and I see all these things in nature. They always have a cause and effect. Like it's always like this physical thing causes this other physical thing. And I just sort of, became, well, I'm not going to spend much more time on this faith stuff, because it's just not too helpful. I'd rather focus on the thing that makes me money and makes sense of the world around me. So then, yes, I basically, I didn't, make it public, tell everybody, but I walked away and stopped going to church, and wow. For a pretty long time, a couple of years, just walked away from it completely. Which is like completely stark contrast to when I came in.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, is that, you share that you're this time leading up to graduation, you have all of this prep that you're doing. You're excited about this next phase of life. You're feeling strong in your faith and having an impact in other people. And it seems like what you do is you step into a season that is full of uncertainty. So I'm imagining that most of your chapter mates were also engineers of one kind or another, studying in the world of engineering. So also very smart people who are incredibly thoughtful, incredibly capable, but prescribed to Christianity, faith in Jesus, that this makes sense. And we're able to bring these things together, the scientific understanding that we have and our faith in Jesus, like these two things work together. And then you step into this realm where it's like the exact opposite of, no, these things don't work together, and this is why. And all the while you're left with very little support that is helping you continue to, rightfully ask questions and explore and have a better understanding of other ways of thinking. but to continue growing in depth and strength of like, this is why I believe what I believe. This is where I see these things coming together. And to go from such certainty and hope to a place of just being overwhelmed with information that all of it kind of makes sense. And it's like, well, so then what am I supposed to do with this? And I imagine that took an incredible toll on you.
Yeah. And it's not like it, happened overnight. Like it wasn't like I went to a seminar one day on one thing and then, and then a month later, I'm like, I'm done with it.
Yes.
It was like, little things in your life and they just sort of pile, or, make you more and more cynical, make you more and more doubtful. And then eventually you're just like, why am I doing all this? I'm much more happy when I'm not doing all this.
Yes.
So I'll just call it quits.
Right.
And yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It just, that combination just made it, very, very easy to fall into that mindset. And I'm not sure if others, fall into the same thing, but yeah, definitely happened with me.
Yes. And
Sure.
I know that they do. I know that, one of the most challenging things for young alumni is going from this very strong, cohesive faith community on campus into a totally new space where they don't have a lot of strong community ties that are helping them ask big questions and answer them well and walk through doubt and some of those things while continuing to invest in the work of faith that's already been done in them, and to be able to walk those things together when you don't have that space to do that. Like, it's just very easy to say like, well, was all of that stuff that I did with InterVarsity or that I did on campus, like all that stuff that I did with Jesus, was that real? Or was that just this emotional communal experience and that's the extent of it? Which it would sound like some of the influences in your life at the time would say, yeah, that's what it was. It was an emotional communal experience and not anything that was real. So then as you're walking through all of these things, like what is you can only take so much of these kinds of experiences. And I mean, and you said that eventually over the course of time, you eventually got to this space, not necessarily publicly, but where you just kind of decided like, I'm done with faith. It's clear that is not where you ended up, that in this place of like walking away from your faith, just being done, like I'm over this. So I sort of a two-part question here, if you can answer both of these things, is one, how long did that season last as far as you saying, I'm done, I'm moving past this, and my life is now a life that I'm just not following Jesus, I'm not interested in faith anymore. How long did that last? And then, I mean, what was it that changed that story for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say as far as length is concerned, there really wasn't there was like a very clear start. Well, there was a gray leading to a start that I like in my mind decided. And then there was never an end and never an official, like, I'm going to get back into it. It was just gray leading to, here I am, it was mostly, because those thoughts don't go away, like once you start really, I realized that once you start really allowing your mind to think a certain way, like guard your mind. I think that's guard your heart, is what the Bible says. And like definitely realized why it says that is like, once you start thinking a certain way, getting your thinking back, you probably will never get it back. You'll have to change, but it's not going to change just overnight. Right. You'll have all of those doubts and all those feelings for a very long time. You have to push yourself. But yeah, going to the turning point, there was definitely a turning point. I remember I was traveling for work at this point. I had said yes to basically everything in my career. So I was doing a million things, working like crazy. Yeah. And in general, it was good. I learned a lot, but it was not healthy. It wasn't a healthy work-life balance for sure. There was an issue with one of our products, and I had just traveled to Korea, Taiwan, and Texas over the span of maybe 3 months, just getting screamed at by customers because it was a situation where we didn't know what the problem was that they were saying. The guy, just to give you an impression, the guy that was, the guy at in Taiwan that I was communicating with, the customer, he said that he would have nightmares about this, like that it was actually affecting his, because what would happen is this event would happen, and I can't explain the event obviously, but this event would happen, and then things would go wrong, and you could have millions of dollars of damage from one of these events. And basically they would, the company that that employed him viewed him as the guy that would fix this, and so they just said, you fix it. And then every time that there was this millions of dollars of damage, it's him that was getting yelled at. So you can imagine he's just taking all that energy and dumping it onto our group. And thankfully we have a group, so it's not just me going there.
Okay.
It's a big group. But I took a lot of, because I was there trying to help, we ended up, fixing or giving him something that worked, but it was stressful as all get out. It wasn't a perfect solution. And it was just exhausting. I pulled so many all-nighters there, and I was just exhausted. And then once I finished that, I did the same exact thing at another customer. And then I did the same exact thing at another customer, and each customer was just enough different to create a really difficult environment. So I was just really tired. I remember sitting in it was a Best Western, in Texas, and just staring up at the ceiling fan and just sitting there, I didn't feel like I solved anything. I felt like, if anything, I just prolonged this bad issue. We don't know what's wrong. We don't know how to fix it. We've just put Band-Aids over stuff. And I'm just staring at the ceiling and just thinking, I don't believe that there's God anymore. I don't believe that there's, I don't believe that there's any reason, any reason to be proud of the work I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't, just very depressed, thought process, just super low, very tired, which also contributed to the depression too. Just a really rough patch. And I just remember sitting there and laying, just feeling numb, like completely numb, because I was just staring up and just so sad. And then at that moment, I get a message. I had messaged the guy who was from IV, Glenn Ewert, who was the leader of our group. He had messaged me the day before, and he gives me letters and stuff to let me know what's going on there.
Yeah.
And he had messaged me just asking for my updated address, because I changed, and I sent him my updated address. I just sent him the address. I gave no context, of how I'm feeling, nothing.
Yeah.
And he just responded back via email. I get the email right then. I remember sitting there, my laptop's open. I get an email. It's funny, I get an email. It's from Glenn, and I open it up, and he said, "Thank you for the address." And he just said, "Rocco, I just want to know, I don't do this very often. I wish I had the email in front of me, but it was very similar to what I'm saying right now." He said, "I don't normally do this very often, but I just want to know, how are you doing? And how is your walk with God? Because I just don't feel like something's right." And he was very forthcoming about this, which I imagine for him probably felt very awkward.
Yeah,
because he knows nothing about my situation. I'm not, I'm not sending him small hints that I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, you sent him an address and nothing else.
Yeah, literally an address. Yeah. I don't respond back, but I was a little bit weirded out by it. And then right then also, my grandmother was a huge believer. She's a really great believer. And she called me right then, and she left a message, because I didn't answer. I was not in a position to really feel like answering anyone's calls or anything. And she just said, "Rocco, I'm feeling like you're just having a hard time. Can you give me a call back and let me know?" And I'm just, those two things happen, and I'm not even joking with you, within the course of like an hour. It's like these two things. Well, I'm laying there numb, just super sad. And to be honest, when it happened, you'd think I'd be like, there is a God, and or whatever. And that was totally not my response. My response was pure frustration and anger. I had been so convinced, and I'd been so preconditioned to believe that this was not true, that for me, I was just trying to figure out, how on earth do these people, did I send something on Facebook? Did someone hear something?
Yes, there has to be a logical explanation.
Yeah, is Google listening to me and publishing to my friends?
I mean, yes, but
exactly. Yeah. but I was so blown away, just completely. I mean, it's the definition of rocking my world, because it's just like, if you think something is true for so long, and then you just get hit with a thing that just does not line up with that. I was very frustrated. And I mean, after that, I mean, coming back, there was this, like I said, it was just gray after that. I was just frustrated, but then it's great. I said, I'm going to try and start, going back to church a little bit, or just, because it was just so weird that I just felt like there's something special about that. But I'm just going to try going back to church. And I have to say, it was so hard going back. And every time anyone would say anything, I was so cynical. And it's like, you just have so many formed opinions in your head,
right,
about how things are and whatnot. But just keep telling myself, there's a reason why that thing happened. So like, I just gonna sit and listen, and go and really try to submerge myself again. And yeah, and I mean, there were, throughout the course, I mean, there was lots of little, times where God spoke to me. Like, there was other people who are in technical fields who gave me their, it's great hearing people's stories about how they came to faith and how they felt God's presence, because it was completely, had nothing to do with, I was, looking through a telescope and God winked at me or whatever, like nothing like that. It was
right.
just it was just, I knew, in this moment that God was calling me, and I was like, that sounds a lot like the moment I had.
Wow.
Like very similar. This is a very similar experience, so I can definitely relate to it. But it was definitely not like, on and off. Even with that crazy experience, it was like not on and off.
Yeah. So, and that entered you into then this, what continues to be the season of you continuing to like, I would have to think this, what will now be a lifelong season potentially of coming back to Jesus, of relearning, of unlearning, of like asking big questions, of having doubts and working through those things, just like real life. It's not all puppies and rainbows believing in Jesus, that it's like, there are things that I cannot explain and that do not make sense. And that is really difficult for me. And there's stuff in life that doesn't happen the way that I want it to. And there's stuff that seems like counter to what the Bible tells us about God's character. And like and so many of these things that it's like, and this is what the life of faith looks like, is saying, yep, I cannot answer all of these things, but Hebrews 11:1, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see, which is, very different. Like scientific discovery would have us say, like, we are sure of the data that we have collected because it shows us what is actually happening. And you're saying like, no, I'm sure of what I hope for, not the things that I can actually see on the data that's being produced by this experiment or this thing that we've run. And that it is faith is very different than having the confirmation of science or the confirmation of whatever it might. And this is not to pit science and faith against each other. That's not what I'm saying here. No. But like that is the reality that we live in. And therefore it is this lifelong experience of, okay, what does it look like for me to trust Jesus in the midst of these things, especially with the history that I've had of not believing, because that makes it that much harder.
Yeah. Well, and you know what made it more helpful, at least for me, is like, and I'll just give a couple examples. Like, I just found that when I had that mind of just stop with the cynical, stop with all that, like just calling myself out, quit with the cynical stuff, just listen, focus, try and learn, and then learn how it applies to your life, and then just go and apply it. I just found God to be just so faithful to a lot of things, like unmistakably faithful. I think I'm believing more and more now. More and more as the days go by. And no matter what anyone tells you, you're not going to change that belief because you've lived it. It's not like you've come to some conclusion. You're living it, and it just keeps showing more and more each day. So,
Rocco, so as I think about our listeners for the show and the audience that we make this for, it's for alumni who are in their who are looking towards graduation and who are in their first year after graduation. Those are really the people that we're wanting to speak to here and help bridge that gap to life after graduation. So as you think about people that are in that first year or who are looking towards graduation, whether that's in December or, in May or June of next year, do you, based on these experiences that you've had, your post-graduation life that you've lived up to this point, and your general experiences, do you have any advice that you would give to somebody that is about to step into or who finds themselves in the midst of this post-graduation season of life?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I just preface this by saying that when I got out of college, understanding a truth about something, like a truth that I felt was a real truth, was like it was completely worth like more than millions of dollars. It was the most important thing, and so I would say one thing is like, just keep appreciating the truth that you have in the Bible. Even if you don't understand it, even if you think because you've listened to it, someone's preached on it many times, that you think, okay, this is just getting boring. I already know this. Like, just appreciate that truth, because one day you'll go to it and it'll be the most, like I said with my wife, it'll be the most like just, basic thing. Yes. But because you've lived it and you've seen it, you'll really love it and you'll really appreciate it. So do that first. Another thing is just pragmatically expect uncertainty. You're getting out of college. You picked. I don't know hardly anybody who knew exactly what they wanted to be going into college. Even coming out of college, I had no idea what I wanted to be. So just expect uncertainty. Expect uncertainty with friends, with college, with school, with relationships. Just expect a big package of uncertainty to come your way. Yes. And maybe, if I could go back and redo it, I would just kind of enjoy the uncertainty rather than just stressing over it. Enjoy it. Say, oh, this is something new. Yeah. Something new to learn, about and to improve my human experience. Yes. Just look at it that way. Expect challenges to what because when I came out, I thought I had everything figured out. I was furthest from the truth. Just understand that you really don't know a lot. And I would say Ecclesiastes is a great book for this. Even Solomon was saying, that you don't, like, your human capacity is so limited, and this is something I realized later on. I was reading all these books to try and understand which, religion is correct and all this kind of stuff. But like, I got a human brain and I'm limited by that human brain. Yes. And you can't just read until, you don't have infinite time. You don't have infinite knowledge. You don't have infinite perfect perspective to be able to even interpret everything 100%. So just understand that you're going to be challenged. What you thought was true might not be true. And that's okay, just understand that God's going to teach you in one way or another. He's going to lead you, in one way or another to either learn more and to want to gain more knowledge to fill that gap, or to just understand that that's an area that you just leave it as it is. It's not worth the time investing and killing yourself over it, and just, live the life and be happy that way.
Rocco, thank you so much for spending some time sharing this story. And I'm sure that there's some amount of this that, like, it's a great story to be able to tell, but it's probably I would have to think it's not always the easiest thing to go back and like walk through, because you experienced some pretty dark, difficult stuff. And so I appreciate you being willing to step back into some of those places and share, knowing that there are alumni who are or will experience these kinds of things. And to let them know, like, there is hope in the midst of some of the darkest places of your life. Like, Jesus is there with you, and he's fighting for you, and he wants to welcome you into his arms. And sometimes it just takes your Or sometimes it just comes in the form of your staff worker, your campus staff asking for your address and your grandma giving you a call.
Yeah. Sometimes crazy things like that. Little things.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot,
man.
Rocco, for sharing your story. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I hope somebody benefits from it.
Alumni, please remember this. The end is not the end. If you feel like giving up, know that God's just getting started and that He will use some of the most creative and unlikely scenarios to keep showing up for you. Keep your eyes open. You will see Him. And if you'd like some tools to help you persevere and lean into hope in these uncertain times, come back next week. We've got a conversation that's going to help you do exactly that. Until then, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Thanks for listening to After 4. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Zentera, edited by Caleb Leppert, and our After 4 theme music was written and performed by John Steele.